Griffin will call the roll to establish a quorum.
Mr. Collins.
I'm here, and I'm told for the record I have to say that I am alone, and I am.
Mr. Darnell.
Here.
Mr. Eaton.
Here.
Mr. Edwards.
Here.
Mr. Ferguson.
Here.
Mr. Hamby.
Here.
Mr. Jensen.
Here.
Ms. Kim. Dr. House. Mr. Morrow.
Here.
Madam Chairman.
Here.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 members present.
Thank you. We have a quorum and we are duly convened. I'm going to start out by saying, because this is our first board meeting in person since February of 2020, so it is great to see everyone in person, including all of you who are in the audience. It's been a rough year, we all know that, and I'm glad that we're now in a position where we can convene in person. I do also want to recognize our student representative on the board. He's from Rutherford County. He's been with us via Zoom, not Zoom, WebEx, from the beginning of his term of service, and we're happy to have him here in person. And he did graduate from Eagleville High School this past Friday. So we want to congratulate him first and foremost on graduating and then being with us here in person. So welcome. I also want to take this time to call on Dr. Sarah Morrison, who will provide a recap from yesterday's workshop session.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see everyone this morning. Thank you for being with us. Thank you to some of you for being with us 2 days in a row. If you were with us 2 days in a row, you know yesterday was a full agenda as well. We covered a lot of ground with multitude of presenters. We heard first from our students in Oak Ridge, who are the robotics team, and help me God, the Wildbots, with a really impressive demonstration of some of the work that they're doing over there in their robotics club. It's a great way to start the day. We then took a kind of a hard right turn into legislative updates from Nathan and heard a lot about the bills that passed this session and what the implications are for the state board and our work. We heard from Michael Durline at the Department of Education about the additional pathway endorsement that will be on the agenda today. We heard from Steve Quayle and Sarah Williams, please, about the CTE work that's being done through the department and the Perkins grant, a lot of the really good workforce pathways programs that are happening across our state. We also talked extensively with Julie Spencer from the department about virtual schools, what that means for districts, particularly ahead of next year, as many of them are applying for virtual schools to continue to serve some students and families who wish to remain virtual. We heard from Katrine Stevens, who's Director of Schools in Tullahoma, about the ways that she's thinking about using the ESSER funds for her district. Had a really informative discussion there. And we wrapped up and had a non-deliberative session in the afternoon about our master plan work. So it was a full day. We look forward to another full day today. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm now going to turn it over to Commissioner Swin. She has some updates to share with us.
Yes, good morning. It's nice to see everyone in person and not on Teams or Zoom or anything else. So a couple of quick updates because I know we have a full agenda. Just want to provide some additional information about what's happening as it relates to ESSER planning, both at the federal and at the state level. So on June 7th, the department is required to submit our state ESSER plan. We received the guidance for that at the end of April. Every state is required to do that. The USDA will not be providing extensions. And so part of that process is to submit both what the financial or fiscal strategy is, any type of feedback that we've received. And we did receive, I believe, well over 120 different memos of feedback and information, which is fantastic. And then also to explain some level of what our strategy is moving forward in terms of data collection, support, and monitoring. What we do not yet have is any information related to the specific requirements of what data collection will be. Right now, we just have the planning requirements. We do expect that they will provide that information in terms of data, monitoring, auditing, et cetera, over the next 6 to 9 months. So we are trying to use the plan template as a way to set a blueprint for what we expect districts will need to submit. And I will say that it is detailed. So one specific example we've been talking about is collecting vacancy data for essentially every position within a school district. No state really collects that. And so there's lots of additional data elements that they're looking at. It is over $4 billion in federal relief funding. So we would expect that that's a commensurate amount of information that they would want and need. Separately on that, we did announce what our ESSER funds would be going towards yesterday based on the feedback that we did receive. It's still in the big buckets and still within those fiscal elements that we put in front of the Finance Review Committee or Finance Committee for the General Assembly. We are predominantly investing in a few core areas. So as a department, we are not looking to do hundreds of different small pet projects. We are saying that we want to go deep in a couple of things that we think will move the needle for students in the state. That is predominantly literacy. We've been talking about it. We're going to keep talking about it until every child's reading proficiently by third grade, but literacy is going to be a big one. We are going to invest heavily in the Tennessee All-Core, so making sure that we have tutoring opportunities for every student in the state who wants it. We'll be investing a little bit in math adoption and online resources because we know that will continue to be a major component of work moving forward. So that's our academics bucket. In student readiness, which is our second element of the strategic plan, we're going to be predominantly focusing on innovative high schools. We announced 21 of those last week and are super excited about that work. Very interesting, very different, very innovative proposals across the state. So that will be a major investment point along with advanced coursework. So AP Access for All was announced, so 5,000 more students will have access to AP courses, specifically in rural and urban communities where maybe schools are too small. They don't have the capacity to hire enough staff to get access to that kind of coursework. The second component in student readiness is going to be mental health. You've seen that that's been a focus for the state and will continue to be a focus. So those are grants, trauma-informed schools, mental health grants, landscape analysis, and partners with other agencies. And then finally, with educators, really focusing on grow your own and pipeline initiatives to ensure that all of our teachers are supported and access to opportunities to continue to grow in their profession and meet needs, gaps, and vacancies that exist in the state. There's some other components and foundational work in this state, so things related to school choice, assessment, accountability, things to strengthen work that is already happening, but predominantly those are the investment areas. And then finally, for an update, obviously the General Assembly just concluded legislative session. We've got lots of bills that we are going through in detail. And so certainly are looking through kind of what that implementation process and structure and timeline is going to be, and we'll give updates as soon as that's available. So those are my updates right now. Thank you. Not sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Schwinn. Do we have any questions or comments for the commissioner? Okay, thank you so much. We're going to move into the approval of the consent agenda. We need a motion. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Jensen provides the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Edwards provides the second. Any discussion? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Cobbins,
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby,
Aye.
Mr. Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kemp. Mr. Morrow. Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it and the motion is approved. Thank you. Moving into item 2, report items recognizing Blue Ribbon Schools and Esea Distinguished Schools. I want to turn it over to the commissioner. Debbie Thompson.
Good morning. I'm Debbie Thompson, Assistant Commissioner of Federal Programs and Oversight at the Tennessee Department of Education. Annually, the Tennessee Department of Education and State Board collaborate to recognize the National Blue Ribbon and National Esea Distinguished Schools. Today, members of those schools are with us in attendance to be recognized for their hard work as well as these national awards. The hard work of their students, parents, teachers, and district leaders. As the information for your school is read, please come to the front to receive your award from the commissioner as well as members of the state board. We will first honor our National Blue Ribbon schools. The National Blue Ribbon Schools program recognizes public and private elementary, middle, and high schools based on their overall academic excellence for their programs in closing achievement gaps among subgroups of students. Every year, the U.S. Department of Education seeks out and celebrates great American schools that demonstrate that all students can achieve. More than 8,500 schools across the country have been presented with this coveted award. The National Blue Ribbon School awards and confirms the hard work of students, educators, families, and communities in creating safe and welcoming schools where students master challenging content and state standards. The National Blue Ribbon flag graces the entryway by flying high and is widely recognized as a symbol of exemplary teaching and learning for these schools. We are proud today to acknowledge and celebrate 6 schools in Tennessee that received the National Blue Ribbon School Award. These schools were recognized by the U.S. Department of Education in a virtual ceremony on November 12th and 13th, 2020. The first school is Central Magnet School in Rutherford County. We are joined today by Principal Dr. John Ash and Director of Schools, Bill Surlock. Central Magnet School is a public school for grades 6 through 12 in Rutherford County. The 25-acre campus has been in use since the Civil War. CMS school students have the opportunity to participate in college prep classes taught at honors, advanced honor, and advanced placement levels. 99% of graduates move on to enroll in a 4-year college. It's known for its academic rigor and numerous awards. In addition to being a 2020 Blue Ribbon School, Central Magnet was also ranked as number 19 in the nation according to the U.S. News Public High School ranking. The mission of Central Magnet School is to challenge each student, teacher, parent with a high expectation of a challenging curriculum, to provide students with a rigorous educational program in a collaborative setting with emphasis on mastery of academics, critical thinking, effective communication skills, and character development. Congratulations, Central Magnet School. Foothills Elementary School, Maryville City Schools. Principal, Karen Skito. Director of Schools, Dr. Mike Lindstead. Foothills Elementary School is a Maryville City elementary school located in the foothills of the Smoky Mountains. Foothills Elementary serves approximately 550 kindergarten through 3rd grade students. The elementary is committed to embracing excellence through powerful and engaging learning experiences, meaningful collaboration and caring, secure and positive environment. The staff and students of Foothills Elementary celebrate the unique and special characteristics of every learner, welcoming diversity and believing that an effective school builds positive relationships, mutual respect as they partner with students, families, and communities. Their students live by the motto of personal best, nothing less. Our third National Blue Ribbon School is Westside Elementary School in Elizabethton City Schools. Principal, John Wright. Director of Schools, Richard Van Huss. Westside Elementary School is a kindergarten through 5th grade school serving approximately 353 students located in Elizabethton, Tennessee. The mission of Westside Elementary School is to provide a safe, encouraging, and engaging environment which will promote the development of respectful, responsible, lifelong learners. Westside Elementary School believes there is a responsibility of students, their families, the community, and the educators. The staff also believes students should be provided with an environment which promotes success in which students will be challenged to develop their potential. While we provide a wide array of opportunities at Westside Elementary School, we know students matter most. Westside Elementary School was a reward school in 2011, 2012, 2015, and 2017, and has a long tradition of academic excellence. Congratulations, Westside Elementary. Lipscomb Elementary School, Williamson County Schools. Michelle Contich, who's joining us virtually, and Director of Schools, Jason Golden. Lipscomb Elementary is the oldest school in Williamson County, being instituted in 1866 by Professor William Lipscomb. Back then, students came from far away as Kentucky and Alabama to attend the wooden two-room school. Today, Lipscomb's elementary school is a kindergarten through fifth grade school serving 595 students. Lipscomb Elementary's mission is to cultivate the ability, intellect, character of each student by partnering with schools and parents to benefit students academically, emotionally, socially, and physically. Lipscomb staff, students, and parents are proud of their school and share a vibrant school spirit in everything the school does. The school's commitment to continuous improvement is enabled their students to become confident, self-directed, lifelong learners. Most importantly, Lipscomb Elementary School wants their students to know learning can be fun. Thank you, Lipscomb Elementary School. Julian Green Elementary School, Metro Nashville Public Schools, Principal Dr. Andrew Davis, in attendance today, Vice Principal Mr. William Johnson, Director of Schools, Adrian Babin. Julia Green Elementary School is a kindergarten through fourth grade school serving 600 students located in the Green Hills area of Nashville. Julia Green Elementary students, educators, and families strive for the absolute best, and the students' performance reflects that dedication. The mission of Julia Green Elementary is to create a foundation that encourages compassion, tolerance, integrity, and a commitment to learn. Moving forward, a more global perspective, the school seeks to educate responsible citizens who amplify and understand the importance of universal attitudes and profiles. Julia Green Elementary recognizes the different ways students can learn and utilizes various resources and teaching strategies to accommodate individual learning styles. Congratulations, Julia Moore. Green. The final National Blue Ribbon School, Hamilton County Collegiate High at Chattanooga State. Hamilton County Schools, Principal Dr. Sonia Rich, Director of Schools, Dr. Brian Johnson. Hamilton County Collegiate High began in 2001 as a collaborative between Hamilton County Schools and Chattanooga State Community College. Hamilton County Collegiate High serves a launching pad for students in grades 9 through 12 to be ahead of the game and expedite their education. The school offers students the opportunity to earn a high school diploma and an associate's degree. Even if the students haven't earned an associate's degree by graduation, students have earned college credit towards a college major of their choice. The school's graduates continue their education in colleges and universities across the nation. Congratulations, Hamilton County Collegiate High. We will now recognize our 2020 National ESEA Distinguished Schools. The National Association of ESEA State Program Administrators has been selecting examples of superior Title I schools from all states for national recognition since 1996. Each year, Tennessee selects 2 schools for recognition, one for exceptional school performance and one for excellence serving special populations. The schools recognized demonstrate a wide array of strengths, including team approaches to teaching, learning, professional development, individual programs for student success, and strong partnerships with stakeholders, including parents and community members. This year's schools were recognized at a virtual national ESEA conference, February 11th, 2021. The first school, W.A. Wright Elementary, recognized for exceptional student performance. LEA, Wilson County Schools, Principal Wilma Hawkins, Director of Schools, Dr. Donna Wright. W.A. Wright Elementary is a kindergarten through 5th grade, serving 535 students located in Mount Juliet. The elementary school participates as a partner in the education of each student by providing an academically rich, safe, and nurturing environment in which all students can reach their fullest potential. The school and its staff work to empower students to become confident, self-directed, lifelong learners. W.A. Wright Elementary has a long history of excellence. A few of those included being advanced ed accredited, being a level 5 reward school in 2012-13, 2014-15, 2016-17, 2017-18, and 2019-20. W.A. Wright Elementary has many mottos for their students. However, one that the students see as they enter the building states, "Let learning begin with me." Congratulations, W.A. Wright Elementary. Our final school for recognition today is Eaton Elementary School in Loudoun County. Principal, Ashley Bassler. Director of Schools, Mr. Mike Gear. The school is being recognized for excellence in serving special populations of students. On May 29, 1912, the Public School Board was granted a deed from P.H. Roberts for 4 acres of land purchased for the sum of $226 to establish a public school for students in Loudoun County. The school was named Eaton in honor of the Eaton family and the community it was destined to serve. Today, Eaton Elementary serves approximately 750 students in pre-K through 4th grade. The school staff is committed to providing a learning environment that encourages cooperation, enjoyment, and discovery. The school wants their students to become educated and responsible citizens who always respect each other and have positive attitudes. Their 2 major responsibilities are to ensure the safety of their students and staff and to establish a climate of high expectations for student success. The school and the community are very proud to have outstanding staff, high-achieving students, and supporting parents, where visitors are always welcome. With the rockets as the school symbol, their motto is "Eaton Rockets, watch us soar." Congratulations, Eaton Elementary. Again, on behalf of the Tennessee Department of Education and the State Board, thank you for joining us today. And please join me with a round of applause to congratulate these schools and the members of their leadership staff.
Want to be a picture? Sure. Yes.
Get everybody on.
I'm all here for gathering everybody together. I do want to say, on behalf of the state board, I just want to add, this is one of the most rewarding things that we have, that we can do. And that's recognizing and rewarding the ribbon and ESE and distinguished schools. So again, congratulations. Thank you.
were one of the first things. You guys can't rattle.
All right. Right up here, Ray,
No.
looking ahead, looking at me. Looks good.
We get your read mark.
I'm going to get us started with a statement that I'm going to read to you. It's very specific, particular, so I'm going to read it. There are several similarly situated items throughout the agenda which lend themselves to being combined into consent agendas. Because the law requires a roll call vote whenever a member. Guess that was too late. No, that's not. Testing 1, 2, 3, on that. Okay. Because the law requires a roll call vote whenever a member is participating electronically, the chair cannot simply make these changes by unanimous consent. This means I need to make a motion here and now, which will save the board from being required to take 6 additional roll call votes. This motion will be to create consent agendas to reduce the number of roll call votes in the meeting. I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself. I therefore move that items 3, C, and D become consent agenda item number 2. Items 3K through U become consent agenda item 3. Items 4A and B become consent agenda 4. Items 4E and F become consent agenda 5. And then items 5A through L become consent agenda 6. Is there a second? Mr. Ruby provides a second. Any discussion? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Darnell,
Aye.
Mr. Eaton,
Aye.
Mr. Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson,
Aye.
Mr. Hamby,
Aye.
Mr. Jensen,
Aye.
Ms. Kim.
Aye.
Mr. Morrow. Aye. Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Thank you. Thank you. The ayes have it and the consent agendas are approved. Moving into item 3, action items on first reading. I'll start out by saying all presenters, please remember to state your name and title for the record. Thank you. Item A, educator licensure policy. Mr. Michael Berline.
Good morning, Michael Derline, Senior Director of Educator Licensure and Preparation. This item is the Educator Licensure Policy, which sets the requirements for licensure and endorsement in Tennessee. This first item, read item, proposes to add a new pathway by which educators can add endorsements to a professional level license. They would have to complete a department developed and administered program and pass required content assessments. The proposal would allow educators to add the following 4 endorsements to their license. 1, English as a second language, special education interventionist KA, special education interventionist 612, and if they already hold a special education endorsement on their license, special education comprehensive. This represents 4 endorsement areas that are of significant need across the state based on vacancy data. And we've built in a robust accountability framework into the recommendation as well, which would include committing to publishing enrollment data and licensure assessment passage rates, as well as presenting to the board annually on implementation of the program. In addition to this recommendation, we're also recommending to extend the phase-out date of a few early childhood endorsements by 1 additional year due to some delays in the Council for the Exceptional Children Standards implementation. Happy to take any questions you may have.
Further questions? Mr. Edwards?
Michael, I touched on this yesterday, but with the new law that also permits LEAs to provide additional endorsements, how is this not redundant?
It's not redundant because the department would be managing this one, obviously. I think it's, there's a question as to what the uptake might be for LEAs. Right now there is a pathway for LEAs to become EPPs, and we see some uptake there. We have 1 approved district for occupational. We also have a couple other districts that have expressed an interest in becoming an EPP. But I think it just adds to the sort of menu of options that are available to educators seeking additional endorsements.
Oh, I've not questioned all the legislature, but it does appear that whether it's the LEA or even the department, it's not the same, it's not really the lane you all normally occupy, and that's why I think it's required for brought on so much discussion that we've had. Is it's pretty much a new concept.
It is to an extent. We did have the Teach Tennessee program a number of years ago, and that program was an initial licensure program, not just additional endorsement. So I think a couple of things. One, I know that folks in the department have already started to really think about the depth of content that would be needed for this program, and looked at some of the best examples out there of additional endorsement programs at EPPs, and sought to hire folks who are really well-versed in their content area. So I think we have a vested interest in making sure that the program is of high quality.
I have a question.
Listen. Yeah, Michael, obviously, I think the most important aspect of this is maintaining the high quality teachers. And as Mr. Edwards said, with now LEAs being able to have some endorsement authority, with TDOE having endorsement authority, with EPPs having endorsement authority, how do we in the future evaluate the various programs?
Yeah.
I know you have outcomes in here, but I would like to be able to somewhere down the road say, this is an effective program, this is not.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And additional endorsements can be kind of tricky too, because we've thought about how, a program that we develop and administer in special education would actually benefit folks who maybe don't intend to or end up going into a special education classroom. That said, I think there are some pretty obvious metrics we can look at, like, passing scores on required assessments, looking at who is coming into the program. Are we having an impact on the vacancies that we're seeing across the state? And those sorts of things could be looked at really regardless of who's delivering the program. Our licensure system does allow us to see which program someone went through. And so that would allow us to differentiate that data.
Yeah, I'm I'm glad to see, they have to pass the practice exam. So that gets them into the license. But at the end of the day, it's how effective are they as teaching our students? And so I would encourage the department over the next year or so to look at what kind of evaluation criteria we might be able to do to compare these programs to see which ones are most effective and how we can share the lessons learned to make them all.
Sure.
Okay.
I have a question that I mentioned yesterday during the workshop that I want to state here for the record, and it does speak to the distinction among the educators who are going into the course, whatever one it is, for their own self-enrichment, for their own professional development, to have this additional content knowledge. And so in the application process, which I believe that the application has not been designed yet, I would recommend that there be a block to distinguish for the educator to state, I am taking this for my self-enrichment or whatever terminology you all want to choose, versus I am enrolling because I expect to teach in this endorsement area. I know that it's going to be challenging to keep up with the tracking, because I asked a question about knowing if an educator who passes is placed in one of those endorsements. They're already placed, and I understand that because they're already a teacher in a system. And so the question really becomes, am I going to move from teaching whatever courses I teach today into SPED as an interventionist, whatever it may be. So I think the tracking of this for all of us to know that it's truly successful will be very important. And then, of course, what Bob added is supplemental to that. So I just encourage you to be able to capture as much data as you can that you may struggle with after the fact, whatever you can capture in that application. I know there will be after the fact, but in place, they moved from teaching this subject matter to this other subject matter.
I think it's a good point, and I think it's something we definitely consider in our application process.
Mr. Edwards has a question.
I apologize, but, Michael, help me get in my mind on the LEAs. What you envision, I know it's still yet to go into law. An LEA decides it wants to set up a program to provide additional endorsements. That moment, what all happens from that moment all the way through awarding an endorsement?
Well, right now, since it doesn't exist,
Right.
it's kind of a hypothetical. And I think we would look to you all to pass the rules and policies that would start to kind of lay that process out, much like you have for any entity that seeks to become an educator preparation provider in Tennessee. If you're asking if an LEA is seeking to become an EPP, that is very clearly set in place. And the expectations for an LEA at that point are the same as a college or university seeking to become a licensing.
So then your all's role would become the same as your role with evaluating and managing, for want of a better word, of the
The
EPP
process.
and that process.
I think that's right.
So that's going to be something. I mean, that's an important additional role. Hope it's an important additional.
In a lot of work, probably.
I don't know. It's being turned on. Questions or comments for Michael?
Madam Chair. I have a question for Nathan. Legislatively, this bill is just passed, right? So within that, did that give us the rulemaking ability when the LEA pathway begins?
Yes, Mr. Darnell. So that is to say related legislation. This is not because of that piece of legislation that you're referring to, but the legislation which authorizes the LEAs to get in that business. It does have a praxis requirement, and it does have us making the rules in that process. Yes, sir.
So, Madam Chair, I've wrestled with this one. I have concerns, and the concerns are not because that Michael and Jack have not answered all of my questions and concerns. They have been great in this process. But in talking with a lot of the stakeholders, with EPPs, with leadership, school leadership, with teachers, I'm not there yet. I think we still have questions. I think this bill that's coming up is big. And, you know, honestly, I don't feel like I have the knowledge of all the other ways that are out there. Yesterday, Michael spoke of different grants, availabilities that people can go through to become licensed and endorsed in certain things. So when I go back to it, and this is what I shared, there are three things that I think about, right? I think about the quality of the program, because the endorsements that we're talking about are for our most needy students, the students that need the best of the best, right? Also, we're talking about accountability and how these programs, if they're not successful, how that's going to play out. And then finally, it's no secret that we have a massive teacher shortage. And are we just moving things around, but still having holes, or are we truly fixing problems that we have? And we know that this is, you know, SPED is one area, ESL is an area, obviously math, science, world languages, they're all at process levels. It's very hard to find them. So for me, I'm not there yet. And I feel like that at this point, maybe we should try to move those together and focus on with the LEA bill and this one as well, to put them together. So I would like to make the motion that we table this until July for further study. I would also ask that the staff, in coordination with the department, look at all of the available projects out there, the ways, and also give us more information on this new bill and how that process is going to go. So I would like to make a motion to pull this and table it until the July meeting.
We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Hamby provides a second, and I should have said Mr. Darnell provides the motion. Any discussion? No. Okay, sorry. We need to do a roll call vote. Mr. Griffin?
Mr. Dobbins.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
No.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kemp. Mr. Morrow. Madam Chairman.
This is a tough one. Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
We have a motion to approve the amendment. Thank you.
Just a table. Yeah. And I would just like to clarify that the reason I voted no is I would like to have additional discussion before I vote.
So the motion was to table. Thank you.
Question, thank Mark.
Yes.
So are we being clear with what they need to have for us in July? Because I kind of felt like, Mr. Eby did is, you know, we're gonna vote yes or no, but I want to be fair to everybody who's already put in the amount of work and what is available for them to gather information that we would need and what isn't available yet because it hasn't been developed, and just in fairness to you guys. So is that,
Yeah.
It seems like the next thing that would be needed, if there's not enough information, what is exactly the information?
Yeah.
So we don't do this to you again in July and say, yeah, but, because again, it's not fully built out yet.
That's right. And obviously there's a balance here, right? We don't want to go too far down the road if it's not yet approved by the board. But at the same time, I think that the hope was that we could get this, if you all approve, we could get this program started fairly quickly to account for some of the issues that we anticipate next year. You know, we could certainly at the July workshop, and I think this was the intent, share additional information about the content that I kind of covered at a high level yesterday. Beyond that, you know, we've thought a lot about accountability. And I think we put a fair amount in the recommendation. You know, we can certainly look at things like LOEs and observation data. And yeah, so I think it's fairly straightforward. I don't know that it changes what we would have presented at the workshop anyway, if that makes sense.
So I guess my question, do I have to do something formal in here? Motion or anything? Or I just keep asking questions.
But the items have been laid upon the table, but it's certainly within the chair's discretion to have to answer questions and make it matters of privilege for this is fine. And as I understand it, the motion was to postpone to a date certain, and that's all up until. So, yeah, it is within your purview for discussion on this.
Let's have that discussion. I think it's important and fair to the department after all the work that they have done to make sure it's abundantly clear what we're asking of them. Because we can keep pushing this down the road and not voting and making a decision. And so we need to know the Commissioner, do you have questions you want to ask of us, or do you want us to call on one of your budget Jack or Michael?
Sure, so I mean, I think, you know, this is the third time we've had the conversation, lots of others, and I think still a lot of clarity about what it is that's expected from the department. So I want to, if there are very specific things, we need to hear them. If it's a nebulous conversation, it does not give us the ability to address your concerns. I do want to be clear from the department's perspective and from a vacancy perspective, this is critical for kids. So if children do not have certified people in front of them, if they do not have teachers in front of them every day, they are not getting the education that they deserve. Right now, from a vacancy perspective, we are overstaffed in some schools and districts in certain types of areas. What this allows is for those teachers who cannot fill jobs in their home communities because they have enough teachers. This allows them to move into vacancy areas where those children are not currently able to be served effectively. If there's another solution that this board has to solve that problem, that's fantastic. But I think right now, you're coming out of a pandemic. You're coming to a place where we are going to continue to lose teachers as they retire. And we don't have enough in the pipeline to solve the challenges in terms of vacancies. So this is one of several solutions, but if we are looking for one solution to solve all of these problems, we are not going to find it. It's going to take multiple solutions to do this. Every single time we wait, that is another year that goes by where kids don't have a teacher in front of them. And so I just want to make sure we're very clear about the impact this has on student achievement at the state and why this matters so much to the department. So any feedback or clarity that we can have so that we can ensure that we can move this forward is going to be incredibly helpful for us so that we can make sure that kids have what they need, because that is our only priority.
I just want to add one other thing for the board to think about too, in terms of the bill that just passed. It's going to be a minute before we're able to bring rules about that bill. So I just want to stress that in terms of what we'll be able to talk about in July related to that legislation, I'm looking at Amy. I don't think we'll have a first reading yet on the rules related to that. So this will delay things in terms of any additional endorsement options for a while, just because of the timing of that legislation.
Thank you. That's exactly what reason I wanted to know is because I think what we're trying to do here is to lump two bills together. One bill hadn't even been signed by the governor and one is moving forward. And I think that from a time standpoint, I go back to what the commissioner said, if we've got a need for teachers right now, this pathway, and I just got to be careful what we're discussing, but I guess if we're clear that we can have discussions, this pathway addresses that issue what we can do is, once the bill is signed, we can come back and we can change things down the road. But to provide them the opportunity to move forward and to address the teacher shortage, that's what I think we need to do in this, and not lump these two things together. I mean, it confuses them.
Nathan?
Madam Chair, I would want to just make it clear that one is related to a piece of legislation. This is not related to a piece of legislation. So let's just make sure that the record is clear about that. The legislation that has passed, it would authorize LEAs to undertake this process. It doesn't involve what you're seeing in front of you. It's just there are some similarities. I think that John was concerned with.
The reality is there is no combining from that perspective. Because one is in law that is not been approved by the governor. And the other is in as one did.
Yeah, it would be entirely up to the board, however, if they wanted to move it in conjunction with each other, they could, and if you want to do it separately, they could.
Not even.
Discussion further.
It's really just.
This way.
These are separate, but sitting here, we're dealing with two things that are very similar that we're going to be getting rules on. Both the LEAs, which is 144 of them. That seems to me to be overwhelming. And the department, neither of which has been in this before. And I think what I'm hearing is we need to go take the next step down the road. The road, I'm not sure we know where we're going. I know what we're going down the road. And I agree 100% that we got to get these areas indoors. And it may just be my inability to get my head around this, but I want to know how this thing is going to work in a way that we have really great shortages of doors for people getting the doors, and 144 out of that. There's going to have to be some standards put in that don't exist. And we don't really know what those standards are for any, either the department or but certainly the LEA. And that may be coming from later when we're doing rules. But I think to kind of have it, see where these pieces come together and when they do before I make a vote on. I'm about to take a step down a road that I don't know where we're going. I know where we all can be. Yeah. I hate the diagram when I just.
Madam Chairman, for the record also, one of the, we, the department, there were several other, folks who work very closely with TSBA on their legislation. And there's an effective date of the 1st of July, 2022. And part of that was so that the process would not necessarily have to be so rushed. Now, that's on the NDA. This, again, is not as a result.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Bryant, I'm sorry, Mr. Collins.
just one, it's really a question. I know at prior meetings, we had an item in this particular category a couple of years ago, and we were visited by a host of, I guess it was the statewide organization for educators who are in special ed. I can't recall the name of the organization, forgive me, but just wanted to know if we'd gotten any input on this from that entity and if they had been a part of this conversation. If not, I think this would be an opportune time for us to engage them and just have some additional perspective.
I don't know the answer to that question at the moment, but I can certainly get that and get back to you all. Really quick too, I just wanted to note, because I didn't say it when I presented the item, this would be free to educators. And with the The only potential cost being the cost of the praxis assessment or assessments in the case of special education. But we're encouraging districts to use their strategic compensation plans to cover that cost. So right now, to the best of my knowledge, if it is not a test-only pathway, there is no free option available to educators, aside from the grants that I mentioned yesterday.
I also just wanted to add to, I think Michael said this, but just to remind the board, this is on first reading. So again, the motion on the table that is passed would table this until July, but I do want this discussion to help inform, as the commissioner said, what we're asking the department to bring back to us, because I need a little more clarity myself. I think they have answered a lot of our questions. They've assured us that there's going to be great transparency around the data and the reporting of the scores and the candidates that are going to be through this pathway. So I do think we just need to be clear about what we're asking of the department so that when we come back in July, if that's the motion that sticks, that we know what we're expecting at that point.
I think one of the big things for me is I would like to know what do we have available already? What are the pathways that we have as far as the grants, the programs, and what is the participation of those already? I think that's a big deal to see, okay, if we have all these other things and no one's participating, is this really going to make a difference? Or are we full in those? Can we change those? Can we expand those? So that way we know all of our options, what's available, and we can move forward at that point.
I would like to ask a question about the timing. If we don't come back to July, what's that impact going to be in the upcoming school year? And would it be possible to have that information and, you know, have an emergency meeting, say in June or something like that, and then a second reading in July? I know that one reason that we put this thing off to this meeting, and we asked back in February, you know, what point in time can we get the information to be able to impact? And basically it was, you know, this was sort of pretty much the last time effort. And I understand the concerns, but my concern right now is on the students, being able that we have the teachers next year, and then we can maybe address some of the issues later. But when can we get the information? Do we have to wait till July?
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, so a couple things just in response to that. So these sort of extra grant programs are really due to the ESSER funds. And so what we're hoping to do is build something so that when those funds run out, there's something in place to supplement. So yesterday I shared a little bit of data around this, but for the additional endorsement special education grant awarded in July 2020, we had $1 million awarded, 200 seats, 8 core regions, 8 EPPs were engaged, in 147 districts. Grow Your Own is one that I think has been initially funded, but that's one that's going to probably be sustained between the EPP and LEA partnerships that now exist with that program. And that was a total of $2 million for the first round. 654 educators total will go through that program. 63 LEAs are involved and 14 EPPs. So that's some data just to give you a sense of kind of what we have done thus far.
Madam Chair, the possibility also exists that you could take something else. If the necessity was there, that's under the reuse section of your.
Yes, no, I understand that. Question that I have would be for the board members, because I think we do have a special call meeting on July 1st, because of the information that's been requested. Is it more advantageous to collect that data, share it in the July 1st board meeting here on first reading, July 1st, and then we vote on final reading July the 24th? That's just to put it out there. Does that sound like the best approach, or to go ahead and have the first and final? I'm asking opinions because I want to know, because you said you passed the motion, you presented the motion. Are you going to be satisfied because you think things down the road, as we said, but would you be satisfied with the other members that you had the information in time to pass that vote on first and final reading in July 23rd?
I would be fine with that. I forgot about the special call meeting.
from my perspective, because I was on the fence about the vote, and I did go to go with the tabling of the item. We've asked a lot of questions of the department, and so I have to say this and reconciling in my own mind. We've asked a lot of information of them, and I think we have to determine now, not later, when we come back again, that we don't have more questions. We just have to know now, put it all out there, because it's, we're not going to move forward if we continue to come up with questions. And I don't think that's the appropriate action we want to take. I think we want to be definitive now, and when we come to vote again, that we are firm and we have little, if any, we shouldn't have any questions at that time, is what I'm trying to say. Now, I cannot predict how you're going to find yourself in a position where something new surfaces that you want to ask, and I completely understand that, because sometimes one question prompted by one more vendor leads to another question, and the timing with this other legislation for LEAs to a certain degree is muddying the waters for us. And I can see these being two separate, to go with one now, not necessarily, I don't see the reason for combining them and delaying until we have what we need to move forward with the policy and rules related to the LEA side of it. Just like anything else, we've made a policy or a rule today, and 6 months or a year down the road, we have to have revisions to that or add something new, a new pathway. So here would be another pathway. So I don't see that personally the need to combine. There are similarities for sure, but you can take what you vote. We can take what we vote on in July, and when the other comes before us, that language and any particular nuances because it's an LEA can be modified. But for the most part, the language could be utilized in a similar way to what we're doing with the department. Yes, Mr. Ed.
So could we get an estimate on the length of time to build this apparatus? What would it be built at as capacity, so that we would know how many teacher candidates could be, and maybe have to break it down for endorsement or whatever? How are we talking about building a capacity for 30 or 300, or make up the number? And then what would be considered a successful launch over a number of years, 3 years, 5 years, as to the participation? So if we start something, we know how we're going to evaluate is it something that teachers are really wanting to take advantage of, but try to give some quantification of it rather than, we hope it does good.
So,
Madam Chair. Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Collins.
the name of the organization is the Tennessee Association for Administrators in Special Education, TASE, and the membership is comprised of education professionals who have administrative or supervisory responsibilities for programs for students with disabilities. So if we've not, I would like in this interim period for us to, for the department to have consulted with this group to garner some additional perspective.
yeah, I think we can do that. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we switched microphones. So
That's all right. So as far as the estimated length of time, I showed you and shared with you a document yesterday that outlined kind of the modules, courses that would be completed. And we estimate that if we were able to start that in October, educators could go through it and complete by May. So it would be essentially one module per month. And we think we have the capacity to serve up to 2,400 educators.
The only thing that I would add in terms of an earlier question on capacity really is around, we have the additional endorsement grants that we've been putting out, and those are fully subscribed. So we don't have vacancies in that. We have actually more people who are trying to go through this than we have spots available, because it is a demand from districts. We heard that from superintendents who actually said we cannot find enough people And many of our board members joined us on these, but I was with the South Central group of superintendents. There aren't enough teachers going through the pipeline. Now, that's a whole other conversation and a whole other problem that we've got to tackle about educators and how we get more people in the field. But until then, they were giving us statistics about the number of teachers who were graduating with able to teach math. There were 2 in one region, and they had way more vacancies than that. They were talking about not having enough special education teachers. And so while that is a very real conversation about how to get people in the profession, until we get to that point, we have more people who want to participate in our grants than we have the funding to support through just grants. We've got to take a multi-pronged strategy. So if it's about a supply and demand question, which I think was your question, it's there. The demand is there. The superintendents are asking for it. We have more teachers who are asking to participate than we can actually staff through the grants that are currently available. So the other part is just around the accountability question, I think, to you, Mr. Edwards. And that's really looking at how do teachers who go through this pathway perform compared to others. That is very transparent data we'll be posting. They still have to take the same assessments as everybody else. And so in this first wave, it would likely be a much smaller group of individuals so that we can manage against this first year, post that data. If we are successful, it can continue. If we aren't, then we shut it down, just like we do a lot of things in the department that don't work. That's part of the accountability on ourselves. I will push a little bit and say, this is free. And there is a business model, and I want to be very direct about that. It is a free option for teachers. That means that they don't have to pay anything. And the decision point is whether it is more important for teachers to have a free option to expand their professional opportunities, or it's more important that teachers pay tuition. And I just want to call that out because we hold our districts very accountable on a lot of things. And I think that accountability needs to spread to everybody. And if we can get teachers a free option to have more opportunities in their career, then we need to do that. That's a responsibility we have to kids, but hopefully that answers some of the questions that came up in terms of supply and demand and certainly accountability.
My question is aligned with the accountability. It's more just what's the checks and balances from an external view perspective, and how that's kind of been my one little hang up on this is, if the department's running this, whether any other EPP program running or any endorsement agency running it, the LEAs, like I said, there's 144. Do we have a plan for a review cycle, not dissimilar to an accreditation or somewhere where someone outside is coming in and looking at how we're doing it, what we're doing it, how they align to the standards, our performance reviews, and giving feedback that is third party, more objective, and those things?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And I think, and just to clarify on the LEAs serving this, if any of you have talked to our superintendents in our districts, I do not think we are going to have 147 different districts who are doing this right now. They are underwater like everybody. And so this is a solution that's probably several years out because they've got to get out of the pandemic recovery before they're setting up ed prep programs. Most are not in that position. So I don't think that's a realistic pathway for the majority of our districts right now. For us, you all hold us accountable. So part of what it is that we put our data up in the same way that anybody else who's offering this puts it up. The praxis scores, those go up. You get to see how teachers who go through this perform, same as any other program. And if we're not doing a good job, you shut us down. And that's how it should be. And so that's part of what our commitment is. And I think we've had that conversation about reporting, but we will show who goes through it, how they did on each module. I think the accountability that we've proposed is actually significantly higher than what you currently get from EPPs in terms of the data that we will be providing. So that's part of it, is you'll get more data. You'll get it whenever you ask for it. We're sitting here and we talk all the time. And then if we are not performing, if teachers are not doing as well in the program, then say we don't get to do it anymore. And we would hope that you would say that and say that we would not be able to. And if we are doing well, I think the opposite would be true.
Thank you. And in light of that, Madam Chair, I would then, for the sake of expediency, I mean, this was a discussion that I think you were wanting, I was wanting, we were wanting before we were voting back and forth, because that's fantastic. Then I would suggest that whatever's the most expeditious procedurally to, again, not waste their time for going doing extra things, but be clear about what we need and then expeditiously gets us through, because free options that are quality are always better than quality options that cost. Not always, but often. I'll say that.
Madam Chair, if I could offer a point of clarification there. The motion to postpone an item is a debatable motion, but the motion laid on the table is not a debatable motion. And because the member from the first congressional district made it as a motion to lay on the table, that was the reason it was not debatable. So the discussion you're having now is in your gift as chair to have, and that's what's going on there. In terms of Mr. Morrow's question, are you asking what is a specific parliamentary move to get you where you want to go? Or I think
My question just was, in light of the discussion we are having, the information they've given us from supply demand, from accountability to our role as a board, and saying, hey, timing is important for the sake of students. So Mr. Eady's discussed at length, what is the best way to keep them on their October deadline and yet satisfy the board's either unanswered questions or currently answered questions.
and I would say from a parliamentary standpoint, any member who voted in the majority on the table motion could make a motion to reconsider. If the same time frame is desired, you could pass it on first reading with instructions to the department to bring back the information you're requesting, or you can just move to lift it from the table, and then we will be back on that item to reconsider. And at that point in time, you could proceed as if this hadn't taken place. It just depends on the will of the body.
So Nathan, is there a way I could amend it to just to pull it back up to say that we could move that from the next full July meeting to the emergency meeting or the special call meeting?
First
Could I
thing,
just that?
the first thing that would need to be done would be to, a member voting in the majority would have to move to lift the item from the table. And then once it's properly before you, you could pass it on first reading with some instructions. And that would keep them on the same schedule. Or you could move to postpone consideration, and then when it would come up, if it's the chair's desire at that point in time to take it on first and final, you would do that. They both, I think, would have the same effect if you passed it now with instructions. But the first thing to do would be a member voting with the majority would need to move to lift it from the table to put it from the. Actually, that would have to be agreed to by the body, and then it would be.
And that would reconsider the first reading of it, then that would.
Then it would be back before you on first reading as it was in the very beginning. It's just you have to go through the process of lifting it from the table because you formally placed it on the table now. So majority of the members would have to make that decision, and a member voting in the majority would have to make the motion to do so.
So therefore, I move to lift this from the table as someone who voted in the majority.
We have a motion to lift the item from the table. Do we have a second? Second. We have a second from Mr. Ferguson. We need to do a roll call vote.
This is vote on
This is.
Put it back in front of us.
the table.
Yes, lift it from the table.
All right. See, I have it.
Taking it off the table, and depending on the vote, you may have it for us to go on there. Thank you. Mr. Griffin?
Mr. Collins.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Amy. Aye. Mr. Edwards. Aye. Mr. Ferguson. Aye. Mr. Hamby. Aye. Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Campbell. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
We have 10 ayes. The motion is approved to remove the speak from the table. And now we'll move into a vote unless there are any other discussions before we go into getting a motion to approve item A, educator licensure policy on first reading. With or without instructions. The commissioner said she would provide bi-weekly updates based on your progress.
I'll move to, accept item A as proposed.
I think Marla, I was second.
We have a motion by Mr. Eby, we have a second by Mr. Morrow. Any further discussion? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Cobb,
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
No.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby. Aye. Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kemp. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
The ayes have it and the motion is approved. Thank you all very much for that very engaging conversation and discussion. We'll now move on to item B, which Reinhold Line has his 2012 literacy and specialty area standards for educator preparation policy.
It was kind of exciting. I felt like I was in a movie for a second. Okay, I need to shift my thinking. This item is the literacy and specialty area standards for educator preparation policy. This policy details the content and literacy requirements for preparation programs. So following passage of the Tennessee Literacy Success Act, we are proposing significant revisions to the EPP literacy standards. I do want to just take a moment and commend the board on having those literacy standards. I think EPPs are really well positioned to implement any potential changes that they need to make to their programs. And that is due to this board having some really robust standards to begin with. So the standards focus on 4 different endorsement areas: early childhood, elementary, special education, and instructional leader licensure. They are reflective of the knowledge and skills educators must have to provide high-quality literacy instruction. In addition, and as required by the Act, there is an emphasis on training, on the identification and use of high-quality instructional materials and training and trauma-informed instruction. In addition to modification of the standards, there are a few kind of clerical updates throughout. So one is an update to the language related to the special education integrated endorsements. Another adds some permissions for EPPs related to additional endorsement in 610 math. And then lastly, it removes some unnecessary language, giving EPPs permission to create dual endorsement programs simply because they can do that in any areas, and it was unnecessary to have that language there. So I'd be happy to take any questions, or if they're content heavy, defer to someone in the crowd. That someone just happens to be sitting right over there.
I do want to share something that I shared with Amy Owen and our team regarding some of the language that speaks to educator candidates. I could actually, Amy, I think can share this with you, but before our final reading, I think you should modify language that speaks to the educator selecting and implementing foundational literacy assessments. I believe the selection is in the hands of the LEA for the principal. There's something regarding the screeners, actually the assessments, select and implement additional literacy assessments. I think selection is a process that's handled at a higher level, unless there's an explanation for that being the case. And I do have another question, a suggestion. So on page 33 of the red line version, C1, the last line, speaks to, and I did not pull up the item, but the use of adequately covered. Can you pull that up from me, Bob, on page 33C1? The use of adequately covered. The word adequately, I don't think sufficiently describes what we really mean here. Because adequately is like bare minimum. Doesn't, it means it's not abundant. And so I'm wondering about, I'm not wondering, I'm recommending you change adequately to sufficiently, which means that we get as much as is needed to accomplish the what's implied. Commissioner, you have something on that?
I think the selection part is that the district selects the screener for all children, but we want EPPs to train teachers on selecting survey level assessments when they look at different areas of need from the student. Do I need to add additional assessments to dig down deeper? So it's about the district selecting the universal screener, but the teacher understanding how to select those additional assessments that dig and drill down deeper on each of their individual students. So we can clarify that. So it says LEA selects universal screener and then trains the teacher to select additional assessments to dig down deeper into the specific needs for students.
Thank you for that. I do recommend that you do that.
Yeah, and happy to.
I just want to make sure I was clear on the recommendation regarding the middle grades endorsement and the 610 math. Were you suggesting to change that from adequately to sufficiently?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yes, we can do that.
Quick question of clarification, in standard 1.1, B, developmentally appropriate instructional practices, it seems to be a big broad. I mean, how are we defining developmentally appropriate for what age and stage based on the level of learner, the age of the child, and where they're at in their reading process and sort of understanding process as you're talking about asking the educator to demonstrate knowledge.
Can you, just to clarify, can you tell me which page you're?
Oh, sorry, page 2
And you
of
said it was
62. 1.1 D just says, so it's basically saying we want educators, candidates to demonstrate knowledge of development appropriate instructional practices that are responsive to diversity of all forms, support equitable learning opportunities, and success for all. And just in a time when words and young teachers coming into the fields are being asked to show proficiency as a candidate on something, I'm just curious how that will be evaluated if their knowledge base is developmentally appropriate based on the rest of the sentence.
Sure. So the instructional strategies that small children use to build content and knowledge might be exploration, play, and those things. The developmentally appropriate strategies that middle and high school students use may transition over time. Those are indicated within our standards. It's just calling out that those developmentally appropriate practices should be covered in their EPP coursework.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Eby?
I have exactly the same question on item E, where it says oral language is a basis for reading development, including knowledge of students' dialect or different language characteristics, including students who are unable to use and or access spoken language. And that seems very, very broad. So can you help me then give me some examples, or is there any way to be more specific?
Sure, not specific, because speaking in Tennessee orally, it looks very different depending on the region. So we need our teachers to be able to hear their own dialect and make sure that they are able to pronounce sounds appropriately so that our children are hearing sounds, combining sounds, and translating that to word knowledge. So it's about the teacher hearing where they may not be pronouncing words correctly, and then where students may not be pronouncing words correctly, learning the correct pronunciation, and then attaching it to those word sounds and those blends to make words.
Thank you. And will the teachers or the EPPs or whoever's making sure they understand it, will understand what you're talking about?
Yes.
Thank you. And then the last question I had on 1.2 talks about oral language awareness, spoken language, including spoken words. Throughout every place else, it talks about English. And I think that one maybe does not use the word English. And so I'm wondering if insert English language.
We can definitely do that.
That's all.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve item 3B?
So moved.
Mr. Eby provides the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Edwards provides the second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll, Mr. Griffin.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kim. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman. You have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Now we're going to move to consent agenda 2, the combining of items C and D. Mr. C. Blaine.
Hi, good morning. Steve Playle. I'm currently serving as Senior Director in the Division of College, Career, and Technical Education at the Department of Education. Good to see everyone again this morning. I have the pleasure of bringing 2 policies here combined for board review. The first is the high school policy. This item proposes updates to the policy to clarify requirements for the 4-year plan of focused and purposeful high school study. Aligns this language with the same language in the middle grades policy, which I'll speak on in just a moment. This item also proposes updates related to the work-based learning framework. Madam Chair, I know you mentioned in the previous agenda item that bringing up multiple policies year over year over year, this work-based learning framework has not been reviewed, I think, since it was originally adopted in 2012. So this is a significant update to the work-based learning framework to clarify information there. And then also this item revises the current industry certification language and updates it to the new industry credential terminology in the graduation with honors, state honors, and state distinction section to align with recent updates that we have released here at the Department of Education. With that very broad overview, I will pause to take any questions on the high school policy before moving into the middle grade policy.
I do have a question. I want to make sure that I understand this. I don't believe this was previously included. I know that the work-based learning coordinator receives the certification training through the TDLE. That would call them having to recertify every 2 years. I believe that may be new. Is that correct? Or did I miss it before?
No, Madam Chair, that has been in policy previously, that they are recertifying every 2 years. This is to stay up to date with child labor laws, other acts. This is definitely something that is on the legislature's mind as well. So things often change very quickly in the work-based learning world.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Mr. Eady?
Yes, on page 11 of the red line version, item number 1 at the bottom of the page says, LEAs may offer work-based learning experiences, blah, 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 blah. The number 2 says students will have access to the system of structured work-based learning experiences. So that seems a little contradictory. I think what we need to add on number 2 is for those students who are offered, then they will have access.
Absolutely, we will make that note. I will share just a little bit more on the framework itself, talking about for credit versus not for credit work-based learning experiences. I think that might be an opportunity as well, Mr. Eady, to clarify here that the for credit experiences will have access to that system of structured experiences. So we'll make those updates, be prepared to share those at the second reading.
One question on the move on with Readiness been coming up to me. So there's a statutory exemption in there where not everybody, where that policy does not apply to everyone. And so just I have a little bit of concern that that's not notated in this, where not like there's a part of the law that applies to everybody, and then there's a part of it that doesn't. And just want to kind of send that back as people are looking at that to ask some questions about that and see if that's still a valid statutory exemption.
Absolutely. Thank you for that comment. This item, while it opens the entire high school policy for potential revisions and changes, the proposed changes right now are just for that work-based learning framework, the industry credential updating terminology, and the 4-year plan of study. I will defer to our legislative affairs team and the state board on making those additional amendments and changes. That's fine, according to what I've been given from the crowd. So we're that will be updated.
I know where to throw that in, so I need to throw that in somewhere.
Very good, thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Very good. The second part of this item here is related to the middle grades policy. It's number 2.102. This item proposes updates to this policy to clarify the requirements for the 4-year plan of focused and purposeful high school study and to align with high school policy 2.103. So essentially what is happening here, what we realized is that there were slight discrepancies between the middle grades policy and the high school policy, talking about the same 4-year plan of study. So what this does there specifically is align those two and ensure that they are consistent across both policies. The other portion of this item adds language related to career technical education coursework and industry credential attainment in the middle grades, specifically adding the ability for students to attempt CTE coursework that would apply for their graduation requirements, similar to what we already have in policy related to other coursework. This would also apply for technical education and for those industry credentials if earned through a CTE secondary course in the middle school middle grades. It would also apply for accountability purposes at the high school level. Happy to take any questions here.
Questions? Hearing none. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda 2, which is item C and D.
So moved.
Mr. Darnall provides the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Ferguson provides a second. Any discussion? Mr. Ferguson, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Darnell,
Aye.
Mr. Eby. Aye. Mr. Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kim. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is approved.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
just want to again say thank you so much to the board publicly. I know I said it yesterday, but say again how much I appreciate the support for career and technical education that you've shown me and our staff at the department over the last 3 years. As this is my last official act with the Department of Education as of today. I appreciate the board and your support. I just wanted to mention that again. Thank you.
Thank you. We wish you all the best in your new position, and I think it's a perfect move for you, as much as I do not want to see you leaving education. But I think that synergy between the Department of Workforce and Labor with the Department of Education, especially with CTE, is perfect. So congratulations and best wishes.
Thank you.
The next, we'll take a couple more items before we take a break. Before you bring into item E, statewide dual credit courses. Ms. Walker,
Hi, Robin Yang, Policy Analyst at the Department of Education. I present to the board on first reading revisions to the learning objectives for 3 statewide dual credit courses: Introduction to Business, Calculus, and Introduction to Plant Science. Statewide dual credit courses are college level courses taught at the high school level by trained high school teachers. Pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated 49-15-104, the Tennessee Board of Regents and University of Tennessee System are responsible for convening post-secondary faculty to develop statewide dual credit courses and dual enrollment opportunities for high school students. The State Board, TBR, and UT System have final approval on conferring credits for these courses at their respective institutions and schools. Between July 2020 and January 2021, TBR convened college faculty to review and update their statewide dual credit courses. The review included an analysis of student performance on the challenge exams, as well as feedback from high school teachers. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions from the board.
Mr. Hughes.
Thank you. I noticed that we pulled 2 dual enrollment courses that are in here for approval, associated with House Bill 580. And I guess what I would like to understand or ask is, do we have a path forward on the implementation of that? Yesterday, we had a pretty full description from Nathan on what was to be in that, but there are still some questions. And so if we could get an understanding of what the department's planning on the implementation of that.
Sure. So once and assuming that the bill is signed, the department is currently working with the Attorney General's office, and so has gotten feedback from them in terms of the outline structure that would need to occur. We will likely do rulemaking internally because that is what is written into it. But the idea is that once we are able to work with council over the next several weeks, we will then have a process that will include a couple of members of the General Assembly, a couple of superintendents, parents, et cetera. We would request, but certainly be open to any board member who would like to be part of that process. We will then create a very transparent framework. The idea is that our districts need to know exactly what it is, how it will be evaluated, even just what the financial consequences are, because again, it's not a may, it's a shall. All of that will be determined in a very public framework. We will post that. We will then provide guidance to districts in terms of what that will look like going into next year. We do expect all of that to happen no later than mid-July, because our first school district goes back in mid-July. And we do understand it's the expectation that that will need to be in place before next school year, but we do want it to be a very public process, certainly a respectful one, and one that includes multiple stakeholders. Thank you for the question.
Other questions? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve item 3E?
So moved.
Mr. Jensen provides the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Eby provides the second. Any further discussion? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Collins. Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kim. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Thank you, Ms. Yeh. Moving into item F, civil rights compliance. Ms. Chrissy Ballard and Ms. Rachel Supe.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Can you hear me all right? Right, it's nice to see all of you again in person for the first time in a while. So thank you for having me here today. I'm Rachel Supe, the Assistant General Counsel for Civil Rights and Special Populations at the Tennessee Department of Education. This first reading item creates a brand new rule regarding Tennessee Department of Education and LEA compliance with two federal civil rights laws, specifically Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. What this rule does is outline roles and responsibilities when it comes to compliance with these two civil rights laws. So what are the LEA's obligations under these laws, and what are the department's obligations under these laws? It also outlines the department's investigative process. So if a parent or a student wishes to file a civil rights complaint, this rule outlines what the department will do in terms of responding and investigating that complaint. This rule does not create any new legal obligations for districts that are not already in place in federal law. With that, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Mr. Ferguson provides a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Hamby provides a second. Any discussion? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Collins.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kim. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Thank you, Rachel. We are going to take a 10-minute break and come back here at 10:50, and we'll start promptly.
Letting Rick know. No one questions. No. Oh, yeah. No. I would make a great song. People go for playing. I'm not that.
Oh, they're so good. They're getting ready for summer and I keep reminding them summer's cool. They're sweet.
I aspire. You're right. It's like normal Friday. It's like down the water.
No, no, I was just. I'm stretching it back. Yeah, I don't stretch
I do not take. Yes, it's very positive. They are level. Very, very. There's an application. Mr. Outside. Actually, here. I said he was like on the inside. Oh my goodness. Oh, I know. Where did you get those girls? I don't. I mean, I just got seen Aaliyah. I know. I don't know how long ago that's. That was
Well, I'm glad you're listening.
Thank you. I do want to know that the civil rights compliance will have a rulemaking hearing sometime in July. So I just want to make that known for the record. Now let's move into item G, universal state screeners. Mr. Jack Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Jack Powers, and I'm the Director of Policy at the Tennessee Department of Education. Before you today, I have on first reading a universal student screener and state adopted benchmark assessment rule. The Literacy Success Act of 2021 requires LEAs in public charter schools to annually administer a universal reading screener to each student in grades kindergarten through 3 during pre-administration windows established by the department. This permanent rule describes various requirements related to the universal screeners, including how universal screeners are used to identify students with significant reading deficiencies, and the process for LEAs in public charter schools to request permission from the state board to use a locally chosen universal screener. Additionally, the Tennessee Learning Loss Remediation and Student Acceleration Act of 2021 requires the department to implement an innovative benchmark assessment pilot program to provide Tennessee Universal Reading Screeners, the Tennessee Universal Math Screener, and state-adopted benchmark assessments to LEAs in public charter schools to more frequently measure student learning and address student learning loss. This permanent rule clarifies that the Tennessee Universal Reading and Tennessee Universal Math Screeners shall serve as the state-adopted benchmark assessment for students in grades K through 3, and that LEAs may request from the commissioner authority to use locally adopted benchmark assessments as the state-adopted benchmark assessment for all other applicable grades, which in this case are grades 4 through 8. I will mention that there will be a rulemaking hearing on this rule. And with that, I will take any questions that board members may have.
Are there questions for Jack? Mr. Edwards.
So Jack, intervention will happen on the bottom 15%.
So the way that it will work is in order to be designated as having a significant reading deficiency based on the screener results, it means that you were in the 15th percentile or lower on a nationally normed screener.
A reasonable person might think that someone with the bottom 30% may have a significant. And when we look at our master plan, we are saying that in some years such as such, that we want 75% to be where we want them, but 25% we're acknowledging won't be. There's a 10% gap between the bottom 15% and the bottom 25%. Do we need to go back and redo our master plan to take it down to 15%? Which I don't think we do. But there's some conflict here, and I know you're locked into 15% about feds, isn't it, or something?
So the significant reading deficiency indicator is the bottom 15%. We also have an at-risk for significant reading deficiency, which moves from 15 to 40%. So those children who are not at that level also get an at-risk designation and also get intervention. It's the level of intervention for those kiddos who are at the 25 to 40 is less intense than the most intense interventions we can provide for those bottom 15 percentiles.
So, but is the level up intervention adequate to get them reading?
That's actually governed by our RTI and some of our Tennessee literacy, foundational literacy skill plan supports that are in place. Some of the things we're doing in the Reading 360 initiative will provide these interventions, which tend to be more specific and targeted spaces where these kiddos in the bottom 15th percentile have a lot of different needs, and you put a lot of different supports in. A lot of times in the 25th to 40th percentile, they may need something with fluency or hearing sounds or something like that. So that's why we do, when we talked about earlier, those additional screeners and survey level assessments to drill down exactly what those students need. And so in the most intensive interventions, there's a higher level of expectation on reporting and supports. In those at risk, they have those level of supports. And then if those students aren't making progress, then they would drop down and get this higher level of intervention in RTI squared.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. The other thing I'll mention too is that looking at that 15th percentile and above, if you look at the rule language here, in addition to everything Dr. Coons mentioned, that also would designate a student as priority status for some of those summer learning camps.
And tutoring.
And tutoring. And then, of course, that 15th percentile and below, I'll just refer to the law, the Tennessee Literacy Success Act law that is very specific on the supports and interventions that deems a student eligible for, including some of those individualized reading plans and that parent communication piece that then kicks in. So there really is kind of a gradient of support depending on what percentile the student scores in.
Are there other questions or comments for Mr. Powers? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve item G, 3G?
So moved.
Mr.
Second.
Edwards provides the motion. I think that was Mr. Johnson who provides the second. Any discussion, further discussion? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby. Aye. Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hampton.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kim.
Aye.
Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it and the motion is approved. Moving on to item H. Amy Owen, COVID-19 continuous learning plan policy.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Amy Owen, Director of Policy and Research for the State Board. I have two items for you this morning. I'll start with item 3H, the continuous learning plan policy. As you know, the board implemented CLPs as an emergency rule for this closing school year due to the COVID-19 public health emergency. And then at the April 12th special call meeting, developed a permanent rule that would maintain the expectations for LEAs and public charter schools to have CLPs on the record moving forward so they can respond to future declarations of emergency. In line with that revised rule, we bring revisions to the CLP policy as well. This is a product of close collaboration with the Tennessee Department of Education staff. They were able to identify common implementation challenges and questions that surfaced throughout this school year, so we can try to address them more clearly in policy. We will also continue to revise the policy before final reading based on continued feedback from the department, districts, and charter schools. I'll tell you, just in this past couple of weeks here, I've spoken with the leadership at TSBA, TOS, and several teacher organizations, and they identified the strength of this policy and the rule is that it strikes an appropriate balance between providing details where needed without being overly onerous for a plan that hopefully will be needed very rarely in the future. So we want to make sure that these are on file moving forward. They're a good basis for districts to begin planning in the event of an emergency, but they're not something they're having to spend hours and hours on to accommodate a rare instance. That's our goal, and we'll continue to work toward that before final reading. So do you have any further questions on this policy?
Hearing none, is there a motion to approve? Mr. Ferguson provides the motion. Is there a second? Mr. Walker provides the second. Any discussion? Mr. Griffin, please call the roll.
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hampton.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kim. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it and the motion is approved. Next up for item I, textbook waiver rule.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item refers to the textbook and instructional materials waiver process that came under the State Board's authority through Public Chapter 770 of 2020. As you know, the State Board has now acted on several waiver applications over the past year, and we've identified ways that this process could be improved and clarified. There were several pieces of legislation relating to process improvements, as well as a couple other topics I'll mention. House Bill 755, Senate Bill 630 of this past session updated the waiver process by allowing the state board to establish timelines for when LEAs may request these waivers. That's really helpful because then we're able to plan ahead with our colleagues at the department who provide support in reviewing specific subject matters. If we know that this is the year we're likely to get a lot of requests about math materials, as opposed to, just kind of waking up one day to that email that says we have one for science and CTE and English language arts. Those are a little bit harder to plan for and accommodate. It will also provide districts guidance and structure for when they can submit these items for review. That legislation also established the requirement for alignment of proposed waiver materials to the Tennessee academic standards with particular emphasis in English language arts. It also clarified how public charter schools may request these kinds of waivers. They have two options. They can request waivers either from the commissioner or from their authorizing body. Finally, Public Chapter 205 of this past session added a requirement regarding the prohibition of approving certain materials related to the Common Core state standards. So the first reading changes to this rule are in alignment with all those different pieces of statute. Before final reading of this permanent rule, the state board staff will conduct a rulemaking hearing to continue to gather public input. Any questions on this item?
Mr. Eby?
Yes, Amy. In the very first sentence, it says, "A local board may apply for a waiver to use textbooks and instructional materials that are not on the list approved by the Textbook Commission and State Board when in the State Board's judgment, the unique or unusual needs of the LEA require." So it's us that require them. They can't apply for a waiver unless we say they do that, or,
I think that's a great point for clarification before final reading. The LEA may apply based on the timelines that will be established if they believe that they have a need that justifies doing so. The state board's judgment is whether those unique and unusual needs rise to the level of approving the waiver. So they don't have to get some sort of permission in order to apply. They can make the application, and it's then in the board's purview as to whether to approve it. So I appreciate the clarification there for final reading.
and then, I'm not sure if it's necessarily for this one, they're down below in the textbook waiver rule. But do we collect data, or can we collect data on what districts apply for waivers? Just from the standpoint that, if they get in a habit every, well, I know I'm gonna get through that, I'm gonna get waived, I'm gonna get a waiver, I'm gonna get a waiver. It'd be nice to know if there are some districts that might be overly applying for waivers.
Sure. In terms of specific to textbook waivers, we are maintaining a spreadsheet of every LEA that applies to the state board for a textbook and instructional materials waiver. The time, how long it's going to be in effect, the content area, and whether it was approved or not. Are you asking more broadly about any waivers that a district requests?
No,
Okay,
and over years.
yes. We are keeping a documented list of LEAs that apply for these waivers to the state board. I've got it in a spreadsheet. So anytime you are interested in that, I'm happy to share it.
It might also be good to know. It might also be good to know any all waiver requests or something like that, if there's any particular district that's overusing that.
And for that, I would defer to the department because the state board had waiver authority specific to, I think it was PC 652 during COVID with regard to certain waivers, but in general, waiver authority is with the commissioner.
Did you keep that data or anything? Yeah, it would be, nice to share that with the department, with the state board, just, give us an idea if there are, as Mr. Jensen says, districts out there that are waiver prone or something like that, and that helps.
Could you please say that the commissioner said yes?
Well, the commissioner did say yes to the data was available.
Thank you. So it's in the reporting. Thanks so much. Any other questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve item 30I? Mr. Edwards provides the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Eby provides a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Griffin, please call the roll.
Mr. Collins.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Handy.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kim. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, yes, 10 ayes.
The ayes have it and the motion is approved. Thank you very much. And now moving into item, J. Ms. Sanders, Educator, Licensure, Discipline.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Angie Sanders, General Counsel for the State Board of Education. This item contains revisions to the denial, formal reprimand, suspension, and revocation rule, as well as the temporary permits rule to comply with statutory changes from the 2021 legislative session. Specifically, it clarifies that directors of schools are now required to report educators who are teaching on a permit for if they're suspended for misconduct or dismissed for misconduct, just like they would have to report someone who is licensed. It also contains clarifying revisions to our review process for those reports received for educators who are teaching on a permit, as well as someone who indicates an affirmative answer to one of the affirmation questions on an application for a permit. Upon approval of this rule on first reading, if you so vote, we will hold a rulemaking hearing. And I just want to state for the record, the majority of the rules that are approved by the board on first reading then go through a rulemaking hearing conducted by staff, and all of that information is available and posted on our website for the public who wish to tune into that rulemaking hearing and provide comments. With that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions from members about this rule.
Are there any questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve item 3J? Mr. Morrow provides the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Darnell provides a second. Any discussion? Mr. Griffin, please call the roll.
Mr. Donovan.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Handy.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen. Ms. Kim. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Thank you. The ayes have it and the motion is approved. We'll now move into consent agenda 3, items K through U. Is that what that?
Great, thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Allie Gaffey, Interim Director of Charter Schools for the State Board. On first reading today is a collection of our authorizing policies that have governed our work as a charter school authorizer. And with the passage of Public Chapter 219, the State Board's charter schools are set to transfer to the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission effective July 1st. So in anticipation of this transition, the commission has approved its own set of authorizing policies to replace the ones that we are proposing to repeal. I'm happy to answer any questions about these.
Are there any questions? Hearing none.
I can't miss the opportunity to just make the comment. This is a momentous moment for us to be getting out of the authorizing business. This represents a lot of work on behalf of this board over the last 5+ years that I've been with the board at least. And I'm excited to be handing the baton over to the commission. And Allie will be leading the charge moving forward on our new responsibilities related to charter authorizer evaluation. So we're not getting out of the business entirely. We're just kind of changing the hat that we wear. So just want to note that. And we're excited to see Tess and her team take this forward.
Thank you for adding that. Mr. Edwards, I think you and I are the only 2 board members that are currently serving that started with this process, becoming an authorizer. So I think we would agree with you. Thank you. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve consent agenda 3, items K through U? Mr. Eby provides the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Handy provides a second. Any discussion? Mr. Berkeley, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Donovan.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Handy.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kim. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it and the motion is approved. We're going to move into item B, charter school governing body training policy. Ms. Gaffey's up again.
Yes, thank you. The next item is our state board policy that includes a list of certified and approved training courses for our charter school governing body members to complete as part of their annual training requirement that's outlined in state board rule. There are 2 additional proposed courses to be added this year, both of which were reviewed and certified by the Tennessee Charter School Center before presenting them to you for approval. Happy to answer any questions on this one.
Questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve item 3? 5, I'm sorry, B. Looks like a 5. Looks like a 5. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Edwards provides the motion, Mr. Eaton provides the second. Any discussion? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Collins.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson. Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kemp. Mr. Morrow. Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it, the motion is approved. Thank you, Ms. Kathy.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
we received this yesterday. It's the Tennessee Charter School Report, and I commend everybody to take a look at that. It's well done, looks all the way across the state.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Item W, all charter school LEA policy. Ms. Kelly Bowman.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. My name is Kelly Kroneman, and I'm the Coordinator of Special Populations and Operations for the State Board. On first reading today is a collection of policies that have governed our function as the local education agency, or LEA, for charter schools authorized by the State Board upon appeal. With the passage of Public Chapter 219, the State Board's charter schools are set to transfer to the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission effective July 1 this year. In anticipation of this transition, the Commission has approved its own LEA policies to replace the ones that we are proposing to repeal. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? Is there a motion to approve item W, all charter school LEAs? Ms. Kim provides the motion. Is there a second? Mr. Ferguson provides the second. Any discussion? Mr. Benton, please call the roll.
Mr. Collins.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kemp. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Thank you. The ayes have it. Motion is approved.
Just to be quick, I want to say thank you to Kelly Kroneman so much for the work that she's done on behalf of our charter school team and our board the last few years. In addition to our LEA policies, she is also transitioning to the Charter Commission starting in a couple weeks. Yeah, month maybe. It's pretty soon. I'm giving you some of my dates, but thank you, Kelly, and we're excited to see you both support the commissions. We'll be on the same floor at Davy Crockett when we're back in the office, so look forward to seeing you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairman. Moving into items, school action items on final reading. We're going to move the consent agenda number 5. That's taking up A and B together. Mr. Jack Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jack Powers of the Department of Education. And forgive me if I make any mistakes in introducing both of these together. This is the first one I've done this like a consent item, but as you mentioned, these are 2 items together. The first is a first reading item that recommends pedagogical and content assessments required for 2 new integrated early childhood and special education endorsements. In addition, recommendations about Praxis early childhood education, Praxis special education, preschool early childhood, Praxis teaching reading elementary, and the EdTPA early childhood assessments for the pre-K through 3 endorsement. This is on second reading, and there have been no changes between first and second reading. The second item is a change in the state board's educator preparation rule regarding clinical practice that would just allow for its revisions to allow expanded setting for where candidates can complete clinical practice. And again, there have been no changes between first and second reading for this item either. And so with that, I'll take any questions that board members may have.
Are there any questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve consent agenda 5, A and B? Ms. Kim provides the motion. Is there a second? Second. Mr. Edwards provides the second. Any discussion? Mr. Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Darnell,
Aye.
Mr. Eden. Aye. Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby. Aye. Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kemp. Mr. Morrow. Chairman,
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Thank you, Mr. Powers. Item C, school facilities rule. Ms. Rachel, okay.
All right, hello again, Madam Chair, members of the board. Rachel Supay, Assistant General Counsel for Civil Rights and Special Populations. This rule on final reading updates and clarifies requirements for school building construction and renovations. There have been no changes between first and final reading. All of these changes do are update outdated statutory citations in the law regarding fire safety codes and building requirements. There was some updated language in the previous version, or the current version, I should say, of the rule regarding accessibility features. So all we've done really is modernize the language since it hadn't been updated since 2015. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Are there any questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve? Ms. Kemp provides the motion. Is there a second? Mr. Edwards provides the second. Any discussion? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Collins,
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eden.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby. Aye. Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kemp. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman,
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Thank you. Item D, Ms. Gaffey.
Thank you. Hello again. Ally Gaffey, Interim Director of Charter Schools for the State Board. This State Board rule governs the process for a charter school to appeal an application denial, a non-renewal, or a revocation decision made by a local Board of Education to the State Board. And with the passage of Public Chapter 219, the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission was created and became responsible for the charter school appeal responsibilities as of January 1st this year. In order to complete the transition of appeal authority, this item repeals all State Board rules governing new start, renewal, and revocation appeals, and no changes have been made since first reading. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve? Ms. Kemp provides the motion. Is there a second? Mr. Eden provides a second. Discussion? Mr. Griffin, please call the roll.
Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen. Ms. Kemp. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman,
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Thank you very much. Moving on to the combining of E and F for our next consent agenda. We have the next two items.
The next item I'm presenting this morning includes revisions to our charter authorizing standards policy. And as a result of our charter authorizer evaluation pilot in the fall of 2020, our staff found additional opportunities for clarity. Here you'll see the only change is one minor enumeration edit that's been made since first reading. And since we're combining E and F, I'll share the next one before taking questions. So F is our charter school authorizer evaluations policy, which provides further details regarding authorizer evaluation cohorts and timeline, the evidence considered in an evaluation, and the evaluation ratings and corresponding follow-up actions to ensure authorizer compliance with the requirements of state law and state board rules and policy. The policy includes the charter school authorizer evaluation rubric as an attachment, which is where you'll see the majority of the changes since first reading,
I'll point out, though, that the changes since first reading really just include updates to overall formatting of the document in addition to the adding of a scoring guide at the footer of each page. No substantive, wow. No major changes I would make. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Hearing no questions, is there a motion to approve E and F together? Ms. Kim wants the motion, is there a second? Directionally challenged here. Mr. Donovan, thank you. Vice second. Any discussion? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Collins.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell. Mr. Eaton.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards. Aye. Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen. Ms. Kim. Mr. Morrow. Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. The next item is yours again, item G, charter school annual authorized fee rule.
Awesome. This item contains revisions to the annual authorizer fee rule to account for changes in law in alignment with Public Chapter 219. Since first reading, we held a rulemaking hearing to collect additional feedback, and no changes have been made prior to presenting this on final reading today. To answer any questions here.
Question? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve item G? Ms. Kim provides the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Eby provides a second. Mr. Griffin, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Collins.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson. Aye. Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen. Ms. Gill. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it, and the motion is approved. Thank you. The next item is H, repeal distance and learning policy, and Mr. Eby Fuller.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Amy Owen, Director of Policy and Research for the State Board. This is a first and final reading item to repeal the Distance and E-Learning Policy 3.208. This policy originally contained information on processes for online or distance education courses for students. However, it has not been updated since 2013, and there are a number of provisions that, frankly, we simply don't do. And I don't know that it's ever been contemplated that the board would do since that time in 2013. I'm afraid I can't go quite back that far. There have also been many advancements in technology and virtual education since that time. The policy is also not in alignment with our virtual schools rule, course access program rule, and the new continuous learning plan permanent rule. Other rules and policies have really made this redundant, and the overall advancements and options for enhancing learning through technology have also kind of outpaced this policy. To avoid confusion on requirements for virtual learning, we propose to repeal this item on first and final reading. We're working with staff at the Department of Education in the coming months to research best practices on virtual learning. We're joined this summer by an intern, Brianna Summers, who's going to help us with a research project in this area. We're also going to be conducting phone calls with a number of school districts, charter schools, and online course provider organizations to develop a more robust and modern virtual education programs rule that we hope to be able to share with you later this summer. The goal here is really to clarify what expectations are and not have something outdated just kind of floating around out there. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Are there any questions, Mr. Eby?
I just have one question. So by repealing this thing, there is still rules or policies that they're not out there operating in the Wild West or anything.
So what we call virtual education programs, we heard a presentation yesterday from Judy Spencer from the department. There are general guidelines and criteria, for example, having a licensed teacher being aligned with state standards, but there have been gray areas about when is a student enrolled in the virtual school versus in their zoned school but taking online courses. Those are some of the things that we're looking to clarify that are not addressed in this policy. These are things that have come up more recently as students are taking online courses in a different way.
Look forward to when that one comes forward.
Me too.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
Second.
I didn't hear who made the motion. Mr. Hamby made the motion. Mr. Jensen made the second. Any discussion? Mr. Griffin, please call the roll.
Mr. Cobbins,
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby,
Aye.
Mr. Edwards. Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kim. Mr. Morrow. Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it and the motion is carried. Thank you, Ms. Owen. Next is item I, special course approvals. Mr. Jack Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jack Powers with the Department of Education. So what you have before you are special course approvals for the 2021-2022 school year. State Board of Education rule and policy allows school districts the ability to apply for special courses that aren't listed on the State Board's approved high school course policy list. Special courses may only be offered as elective credit, and the Department of Education annually reviews special course applications and assigns subject-specific course codes to special courses approved for 1, 3, or 6 years. And so this item presents that list of courses for the board's approval for the 2021-2022 school year. With that, I will take any questions.
Questions, Mr. Eby?
Just one question, determining whether it's 1, 3, or 6, is that based on what they request, or is that based on the department evaluating the board and determining if it's for 1, 3, or 6?
That is a good question, Mr. Eby. I do not know the answer to it, but I would be happy to follow up with our program team and ask.
Yeah, I'd like to know if there's a criteria for determining it or what. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Mr. Darnell provides, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Ferguson provides a second. Any other discussion? Mr. Griffin, please call the roll.
Mr. Cobbins,
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kim. Mr. Morrow.
Aye.
Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it and the motion is approved. Thank you, Mr. Powell. The next item is the minimum salary schedule. I believe it's Mr. Charlie Bartolino. And Mr. Charlie, I don't know if I'm butchering your name, so I know it's straight.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would not presume to correct you, but you did say it exactly right, so thank you for that. Charlie Buffalino, I'm the Assistant Commissioner of Policy and Legislative Affairs. I am here to present to you on first and final reading a proposal to raise the state minimum salary schedule for fiscal year 21-22. Pursuant to TCA 493306, the Commissioner of Education is required to annually present and submit to the State Board of Education for approval a salary schedule for licensed personnel. That schedule must include a base salary for licensed personnel with a bachelor degree and 0 years of experience. I also would note before going forward, I think it's important for us to note the context of where we were last year at this time. As you may recall, I presented to you virtually when we were sort of in the first sort of throes of the pandemic, the unfortunate news that we had to pause a planned increase. And we had heard Governor Lee talk about the importance of increasing teacher salaries in his State of the State address in January of that year. And I had to deliver the news to y'all that because of budget cuts and uncertainty, we had to not proceed with that at this time. I know myself and the Commissioner and Governor Lee are pleased to come back to you saying we are back on track with teacher increases now. And so what this item is before you is a proposal that would increase the current state minimum salary schedule, which is currently at a base salary of $36,000 to $38,000. A few additional notes of context. The current FY22 budget includes approximately $120 million in improvements for PEP instructional salaries. The legislature and the governor thought it was important to increase the instructional salary component by 4%. And then this comes with that sort of additionally, or to supplement that in terms of increasing that floor of the minimum. Because the BEP is a funding plan and not a spending plan, each district utilizes those increases as they see fit to meet their unique compensation needs. And so for this item in particular that's in front of you, 100% of that $120 million improvement for salaries must be spent on educator compensation. But this provides that any district below the statewide weighted average must utilize the funds for salaries and not benefit. The salary schedule and any adopted adjustments represent only the minimum that a district must pay to individual teachers. And then the final thing I will note is a little bit about how this actually affects districts practically in terms of what districts this affects. Obviously, a number of our districts are already above that minimum, including the proposed increase. And so based on our district reported data, an estimated total of 74 school districts will be required to increase at least one level of their local salary schedule in order to comply with this new salary schedule. And then finally, as one last note, I will note there was a piece of legislation that relates to this somewhat. It has not been signed into law yet, but it's been transmitted to Governor Lee for his action. That is Senate Bill 1338 and House Bill 865. And what that bill is it said when the legislature implements increases to the instructional salary component for the purposes of increasing teacher salaries, there must be a proportional increase percentage-wise in the minimum state salary schedule. So this 38,000 we're presenting to you would exceed the 4% increase that was included in that budget. This approximately would raise it by 5.6%. So that legislation, should it become law, which it is not as of this moment, we would still be exceeding that floor that that piece of legislation sets. And so with that perhaps overly lengthy explanation, I would like to defer to the commissioner. I know several of you are interested in where are we going from here. Obviously, this is what we're doing today, but I know the commissioner has had extensive conversations with the governor's office about where we're going in terms of increasing teacher salaries as a state in the future. Commissioner.
Thank you, Charlie. So I also received a number of questions from you in preparation for this and want to make sure that I address those. So first and foremost, I think this is a really important move in terms of making sure we stay on track and we're not skipping a year, which is the 36 to 38,000. I also want to preview that it is the intention to go to 40 next year. We have done the due diligence in terms of the conversations we have had in evaluating both what is the impact for districts, and Charlie spoke to the number of districts who would need to raise their floor and what that means when you go from 1,000 to 2,000 per year, et cetera. And that is why it's kind of a 2-year process. And so that is the thinking in terms of our planning. We've also, for the first time, and I do want to thank our core offices because they did this work. When we talk about statewide salaries, there's a very big difference between Metro Nashville and Clay County and Lake County and Hamilton County. And so we want to make sure that we're thinking very critically about the impact for individual districts and who they're competing with. Tennessee, as you all know, is surrounded by lots of other states with lots of other salary schedules. So we did that kind of painstaking work of district by district, evaluating, especially those that are on the border, what the other states are paying to those same teachers. And so we might look at County X, especially let's say Shelby County, there's a couple of states. We might say, great, what are teachers if they just drive over the border? What are those teachers making? And are we competitive or are we not? And candidly, we have some big challenge areas. And I'll specifically call out Lake County as a really great example of that in terms of the salary schedule when you go over to Kentucky. And so when we think about not just making sure we have enough teachers in our pipeline, but that we are compensating them in a competitive way so we keep our excellent teachers in state, that's a very important conversation that we need to continue to have and accelerate. That being said, we also know that we can't really vote on this, and you all can't vote on this. We can't provide any kind of recommendation until after the General Assembly concludes, because that allows you all to know exactly what was put if there's any increase in that instructional component of the VEP. That is really hard on districts because they essentially have to put that into place in just a couple of months. So I would like to potentially request a longer engagement and conversation around how we can think differently about this so that we are still bringing this to you in this meeting, but we are able to say this is for a year in advance, telling districts you have a year to get to this point. It allows districts to plan effectively. It means that if we have a big jump, and this is part of the challenge I know you all have, is if we want to make big jumps in salary schedules, you can't do that with 3 months notice because then it leads to layoffs if they don't have enough money and they haven't budgeted for it, and it puts districts in a hard position. So I would like for us to get to a point where we are able to plan and help districts plan effectively, give them a year and 3 months of notice And that will allow us to have I think, a more aggressive, for lack of a better word, conversation about increases that can happen in the salary schedule. That does require planning. So I just wanted to preview that, just say that that's kind of the direction we're thinking of moving, making sure that we can be really serious about this conversation and very deliberate about it, and still give districts enough time to plan, ensure they are able to keep all their amazing staff members and teachers, and certainly allowing us to move more assertively and be more competitive, especially when we're looking at states that our districts are competing with right now. We're happy to get you that data. I know that was a specific request from one member, but we do have that listed by district and county, and then certainly what those competing salary schedules are for your review for your individual areas. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for thank you for adding that information for the rest of the board, because we had a conversation about that. And I think it does behoove us to move in this direction, and we can circle back and talk about how we would accomplish that if we decide to do that in workshop before the July 23rd board meeting, because time is of the essence of planning. I know that I hear every year from directors of schools, when will we see the minimum salary schedule? And if you don't get it soon enough to me, and I can't get the proper approval from my board of commissioners, the local commissioners, it's a struggle, and I might have to cut staff. I probably will have to eliminate several teachers if we don't have this information in a timely manner. So I think this is just timely to be able to do this. I think it behooves us to be a part of that solution, and perhaps you and your team will come with recommendations, and then we could respond to those suggestions of how we move this forward in a way that gives us plenty of time to make this decision. Any other questions or comments regarding this? Is there a motion to approve item J? Ms. Kim provides the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Handy provides a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Baker, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Commons.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell. Aye. Mr. Eaton.
Aye.
Mr. Edward.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kim.
Aye.
Mr. Morrow. Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Thank you. The ayes have it, and the motion is approved.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Polino. And moving into MK, local education agency of the salary schedule. Did I say it wrong that time?
You did, but we have something very exciting.
Oh, good. And let's not the way I pronounced his name. Item K, Ms. Martha Moore. I already said that. Okay.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I am Martha Moore. I'm the Senior Director of Educator Effectiveness with the department, and I am here to share with you some information on LEA alternative salary schedules. Strategic Compensation Policy 5.600 permits LEAs to meet the requirements of differentiated pay through the adoption of an alternative salary schedule approved by the state board. The policy also establishes a validity period of up to 3 years for approved alternative salary schedules and requires districts to submit alternative salary schedules for reapproval every 3 years. With that, we have 8 districts requesting reapproval to continue their performance-based alternative salary schedules that utilize LOE's level of overall effectiveness scores or observation scores to determine base pay increases. These include Gibson Special School District, Johnson County, Lincoln County, Putnam County, Ray County, Sequatchie County, Trousdale County, and Wilson County. 5 districts are requesting reapproval for alternative salary schedules that provide specific criteria for compensation for advanced degrees. These are Fentress County, Hawkins County, Millington Municipal, Sweetwater City, and Union County. 1 district is requesting new approval for a performance-based alternative salary schedule that utilizes observation scores or individual growth scores to determine base pay increases. This is Jefferson County. You have the accompanying attachments that include an overview of each district's proposed salary schedule and differentiated pay components for your approval. The Department of Education recommends acceptance of this item on final read. The SBE staff concurs with this recommendation. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
The first time we approved this, I did not catch this at the time, but there's one district, Lincoln County, I just lost it. There's a process where there is, sorry, I just went away. Anyway, it speaks to level of effectiveness and increases for those teachers who score 3, 4, or 5 on LOE.
Yes, ma'am.
And with regard to that, it's the same percentage increase for all of those positions, for all of those assessment levels. Do we ever ask questions to ask them, why would they be giving the same exact percentage for the 2 or 3 versus the 5 or 4?
We have worked with Lincoln County for many years. As a matter of fact, they were one of the first the first approved differentiated pay plans. Their pay plan is developed with the assistance of a teacher advisory council. And so it's developed with their recommendations and in concert with what those teachers requested. So based on that, they have developed their plan around the levels 3, 4, and 5 being the same bump forward. It's also a value proposition for them that a teacher that is meeting or exceeding expectations is a valued teacher. So that's the metacognition behind their decision.
Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it. It's just in the business world, if you're a 3, you get a certain percentage. If you're a 4, a certain percentage, and a 5. But I understand the process and I respect it. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Questions or comments? Is there a motion to approve? Mr. Eby provides the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Edwards provides a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Griffin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Collins.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby. Mr. Jensen. Ms. Kim. Mr. Morrow. Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it and the motion is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Item L, Universal Students Career Emergency Rule, Mr. Jack Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jack Powers of the Department of Education. And I guess today I have the distinct pleasure of presenting the last item, regular item on the calendar of the first state board meeting back since we shut down shop.
That's
So
quite an honor.
I hope so. I think it's definitely something. But anyway, happy to present this rule to you all today. This one looks in a lot of ways very similar to the permanent rule that I presented on a while back in the meeting. The reason that we need an emergency rule to describe the administration of universal reading screeners is because that's directed to occur by law beginning next school year. And so this emergency rule is needed really to kind of fill in until that permanent rule can be fully promulgated. And so it contains the same language related to screeners as that first one that the board already voted on a little while ago there. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions that board members may have.
No questions. So hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Present at the same time, Mr. Edwards. Other, Mr. Edwards provides the motion. Second.
Second.
Mr. Hamby provides the second. Any discussion? Mr. Griffin, please call the roll.
Mr. Collins.
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Edwards.
Aye.
Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby. Aye. Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
Ms. Kim. Mr. Morrow. Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
The ayes have it and the motion is approved. Thank you very much, Mr. Powers. I think you probably hold the record for the most presentations today.
I'm honored. Thank you all.
Great job. Thank you. Okay, moving into agenda item 5, future licensure actions. We're hearing item A to L together as a consent agenda. Mr. Todd Madison.
Good morning, Todd Madison, staff attorney for the board. Presenting the staff recommendations for license actions. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take those up with this.
Are there any questions on any of those items? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve items A to L? So it's in agenda number 6. Mr. Hamby provides the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Eby provides the second. Any discussion? Mr. Goodwin, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Calvin,
Aye.
Mr. Darnell.
Aye.
Mr. Eby. Aye. Mr. Edwards. Aye. Mr. Ferguson.
Aye.
Mr. Hamby.
Aye.
Mr. Tennyson.
Aye.
Ms. Campbell. Mr. Morrow. Madam Chairman.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, you have 10 ayes.
Thank you. The ayes have it and the motion is approved. Did you think we would get to this point at 11:45? I didn't, honestly. Thank you all so much. I do want to thank the board. Your engagement level is just absolutely excellent, and I thank you for that. I do want to, again, thank all of the presenters. There's no way we could do the work that we do without you. That includes everybody in the department, as well as our own team, your great work and due diligence. Thank you immensely. I do want to know if there are any closing remarks from any of the board members, the commissioner, or Dr. Morris. Hearing none, we are officially adjourned. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great evening.